So I'll go ahead and pass it on off to Judy, our President and CEO of the NAP, and Michael, our Vice President of Science and Conservation.
Of course,
Great.
the minute you pass it off, there's an airplane taking off, but if the sound gets bad, I'll move inside. It just seemed like a nice morning, and this is supposed to be an informal chat, so I thought an informal setting would be appropriate.
Sure. So Judy, I don't think you answered in our banter there at the beginning. Are you a coffee or tea person?
Oh, I'm definitely a coffee achiever. Remember those old commercials? 2 cups of coffee at least.
Yeah. We, right before the this Christmas, before the pandemic was a thing really on most people in the United States' mind, we, my sister-in-law, my mother-in-law, and I all went in together to get my wife an espresso maker. And it has been a lifesaver because we are definitely highfalutin coffee addicts. So it's been great to have that. So Judy,
we lived next to the Pete's Coffee in Berkeley, and the original Pete's Coffee in Berkeley, and then moved to Washington D.C. in '81, and coffee in D.C. was horrendous at that point. And with mail order, you'd have to call and send them a check. We would mail order coffee to the East Coast.
Wow. Yeah. So I know we've got a number of members tuning in here. It looks like we got 11 folks on now. That just went up to 12, I think. And I'm sure the question on a lot of members' minds is what the state of the museum is and how we're faring in these unusual circumstances. And so maybe if you could start off with that, and then we'll get into some more informal Q&A.
Sure. We are okay. And, partly because of the generosity of our donors. We have, as many of our members probably know, we have a pretty diversified income stream. We depend quite a bit on admissions, but we also have a number of contract and other types of research, paid research work that Michael, your unit does. So you guys are helping us stay afloat mightily right now. And we came into the pandemic strong. We had actually had a really good year. We were really careful with our funding. We did get a PPP loan. We did take austerity measures. So staying closed through the fall makes a ton of sense for us because, as you can guess, admissions are normally quite low this time of year. In talking to colleagues around the country, they're getting maybe 25 or 30% of their normal visitation, and you take 25 or 30% of what our normal low visitation, and it's a lot of effort for a fairly small piece, especially because it's mostly schools that are visiting this time of year. So normally. So this allows us to focus our efforts on other things, and instead of working directly with visitors on the floor, we're working directly with people online.
Yeah, and you mentioned that about fall. This time of the year would normally be a time when we would see school groups would be a predominant portion of who we're seeing. What are we doing now to serve the school groups?
Well, we're about, I guess, next month, we're going to be launching some prototypes for electronic field trips for schools and for parents and caregivers and for aftercare, after school programming. And it's going to be a combination of taped and live and activity-based programming.
Yeah, and I know from the science side of things that the education and engagement team is reaching out to us to give people look into the eye of science at the museum. You know, so much of the next generation science standards and things like that have to do with what is the process of science and what does it mean to be a scientist and all that sort of stuff. So it's, you know, one of these silver linings, mixed blessings, bittersweet, whatever you want to call it, kind of things, that the remote nature of things actually makes it a lot easier than in museum programming for a scientist to participate in things. So I know our team's looking forward to being a part of that. So.
Yeah, we've transcended time and space
Right.
by moving online, and so we can go out in the field with scientists. We can go behind the scenes. We can do it at your convenience, and then have it available for schools when they want it. So
Yeah.
I mean, we feel that the live programming will be very popular, but for many classes, they may just not be able to make it during the couple of hours that we're going to repeat it during the day. But if they can't, then they can access it. But this gives us a chance to talk about why we do science, what's so exciting about it, and careers, and some of the other things that, along with the standards-based education that we usually do.
Yeah, I was just talking to someone yesterday who works out in the Hawaiian Islands and was in a former life in charge of albatross bolus citizen science program.
Right.
So they would.
Everybody know what a bolus is? You better explain.
Well, you're the bird person. You explain what the bolus is.
Well, it's what they're throwing up.
Yeah.
You know, they can't digest everything. They eat these things whole, and it doesn't all go all the way through. Some of it comes back up, and you know, people may have picked through owl pellets. That's a form of bolus. I didn't realize albatrosses had boli as well.
Yeah. And so they would go out to the Midway Atoll and collect all these boluses, and then they send them out to classes across the United States who do these dissections. And there's, like, you know, some ecology in there, but then there's also, almost invariably, they have ocean plastics in them as well. So there's this story as well. So I think she was saying they collected about 2,000 of these boluses a year and sent them out, and collectively they reached like 100,000 students. Was the overall impact, because they were going to lots of different classrooms. And you know, that's just sort of the nature of this sort of distributed online kind of world, and the potential to increase our reach. So, you know, we got to find these silver linings to the state that we're in, and I think this is definitely one of them. But I just want to remind people who are joining us that you can put questions into the Q&A. If you've got questions for Judy or myself, please feel free to do that. Judy, you know, you are clearly someone who loves nature. You're sitting on your porch. We were earlier, before everyone else joined us, talking about hummingbirds that are visiting. What were some of your formative experiences with nature as a young person?
Well, I grew up in California, and in LA, right at the beach, Venice, and spent my junior high and high school years hiking. We were all over the Sierras. We did cross-country skiing and mountaineering and some peak bagging. And we were always in a big group, and invariably one of the mothers, you know, would stay behind with the field guides, and and when the last of the laggards caught up, you know how that is, and that the group takes off again and everybody's panting, she would pull out the field guides and start looking things up. And I realized, well, you know, it isn't actually a problem. I was always the smallest, and so every once in a while I'd be in the tail end, and you know, start looking at her field guides and realizing, you know, there's other stuff to see beyond bagging peaks. And then at Berkeley, there's a famous course. I think it's still taught, natural history of the vertebrates. It's a year-long course where you go out, you learn mammals, herps, birds, and you go out and into the field every week. And that really cemented my my interest in natural history.
And do you have any memories? I love this this reference to looking through the field guides and sort of discovering nature through field guides. Was there any sort of birds or critters that you saw in the field guides that you remember like wanting to catch, like not wanting to see for the first time? So for me, it was painted buntings. When I would look through the bird field guide, I saw painted buntings, and I was like, I want to see a painted bunting. Were there any ones that you were passionate about?
Man, painted buntings were everyone's favorite because they were so damn colorful. I always wanted to find the really rare things and never did, but
yeah.
We were always in the tropics. We were always gunning for the really rare and elusive tropical species, and occasionally you would luck into it.
Yeah. So you've referencing in the tropics. That was when you were a graduate student at Berkeley, correct?
Undergraduate and graduate.
Undergraduate. So you spent time in the tropics during your
Berkeley
undergrad?
had a President's Undergraduate Fellowship, and I was the first person with the moxie to ask for funding to go overseas and do field work. And so I started as an undergraduate at the Smithsonian Tropical Research Institute, and then stayed for my graduate work.
And that's Panama, right?
Yeah, it's an island in the middle of the Panama Canal that was once a mountaintop, that when the final successful attempt to build the canal didn't involve digging, it involved flooding the inland area and then creating locks down to both oceans. And so this Barro Colorado Island was a mountaintop that turned into a reserve. And we would sit there and drink beer and watch the ships go by.
Nice.
There's no field work without beer, right? Even if it's lukewarm.
Yeah. No, I can testify to that. It's best if it's ice cold if you're in Baja California, but lukewarm will do. Someone's chimed in here in the chat that they had heard that you have been keeping a butterfly garden, and that they have started one in Pacific Beach, and we're lucky enough to get a monarch this year. Wondering if you have any tips and tricks.
I started late in the season, and all I did was buy narrow-leaf milkweed in pots, and I was going to put it out in my yard, and I looked carefully at the leaves, and there were eggs on the leaves. So I thought, I'll just leave it up on my deck and watch it. And indeed, I did get I got 3 larvae, and one, I don't even know what happened to it, but the other 2 did hatch, a boy and a girl.
All right.
And I did nothing. All I did was water the plants.
Yeah.
So that was a really fun thing to do. You have to order the narrow-leaf milkweed through a specialty nursery, but they'll deliver it to your local nursery. And I didn't even cover the plants. I figured they're such toxic larvae
right.
that.
Yeah. So let's go. You spent this time at Berkeley and down in Panama, but then eventually moved east instead of moving west. They say move west, young man. You moved you moved east, young woman, and started at the Smithsonian. I know we're there. Have had an incredibly successful career. And then now you've been back with us for about 3 years. What do you miss the most and miss the least about Washington, D.C.?
Well, I still miss my friends and neighbors back there. And actually, with the pandemic, we've been getting together. There was a group of people that got together for coffee every Friday, and they still do. And when they switched online, I would get up early and check in with them. Yeah, and working at the Smithsonian is really fun. There's adventures every day and a lot going on, and you feel like you're in the center of the universe. But it's also so large and so hard to get any one thing done. It is such a pleasure to be out here and in an organization where we can actually see results.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean that's what. I've only worked, well, I mean, I've been at the Australian Museum. I did a postdoc there, but my first real paying job, other than being a pizza delivery guy and all that sort of stuff you do as a teen, was here at the Natural History Museum, and I certainly feel like we're nimble, that we're able to, bend more quickly than I see other organizations being able to respond. So I can feel that there.
I haven't written one memo of supplication since I arrived. I had a stack. I had a, electronic file of my memos of supplication.
Excellent.
And sometimes I would just write them after the fact.
Yeah.
But.
Yeah. So I got a little bit of a weird question. We do this at our dinner table, where we do Mount Rushmores of something. So we'll do like a Mount Rushmore of fast food restaurants. And I'm curious about what your Mount Rushmore of birds would be, because I know you did your research on birds.
Yeah, wow. That's a good question. I mean, I'd have to start with checker-throated ant wren, which is one of the species I studied in Panama, and they're just sort of your typical tropical birds, small and brown and obscure looking, but really fascinating once you get to know them. And I love that they're just so totally uncolorful, that they are the opposite of a toucan, which are kind of trite as far as I'm concerned. But so okay, so we'll.
Are they? Well, so checker-throated ant wren, is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Just a quick question, because I was recently researching a talk that I gave about birds, the interaction between birds and insects, and I was reading about ant birds and ant wrens. Are they? Do they have any sort of morphological specialization?
They're not obligate ant followers.
Okay.
Like the ant birds, and I know that everything's been reclassified many times, but they are still in the same family as the ant shrikes and the ant birds, and the ant birds are obligate followers of army ants. So when the army ants move through the forest, there's a whole bunch of species that follow along, and they eat all the insects that are fleeing the army ants. And then there is this behavior called anting, where they'll pick up an ant and rub it on their feathers. That's supposed to, it's believed that it provides some protection against mites. But I studied mixed species flocking, which was above into mid-level, not ground.
Okay.
And in the tropics, famously, it's like a layer cake, and different communities live in different areas. So the mixed species flocking that I studied, all the birds were territorial, and they'd have these very small territories, but a flock would move, and so they would sort of hand off the flock to the next territory, and it would be wood creepers going along and following the eating insects that live on bark. And so if they hung out around these sort of excitable ant wrens, they would know if a predator came by. So they would go all day. They'd have larger territories, but it was an interesting system. All these different territories overlap, but the flock itself moved through the day. Different individuals, same species. So that's what I studied. Yeah, it was interesting. Lots of territorial battles. at their invisible edges. And it was, interestingly enough, it was male versus male, female versus female, and occasionally they just switch and go off with another mate. for a while. It was interesting. Okay, well, it's going to take forever to answer this. I'll just give you one more bird.
Okay.
Because we'll go for 2 rather than 4.
Sure.
I've always admired the great Potu.
I'm not
First of
familiar
all, that's a fantastic name, right?
with it. Yeah, right.
It's in the nightjar family, and it's enormous. And during the day, it looks like a snag branch. It stays still and puts its head up, and it looks like a broken off branch. But it's an enormous nightjar.
And where are they native to?
They're tropical. Yeah,
Okay.
they'd be subtropics.
Cool.
They're and incredibly hard to see. But
Yeah. So we've got some other questions in here. One's from Maxine, where she's asking if we can discuss local wildlife dealing with our recent fires and the impact. And I think for that one, Maxine, I'm going to say stay tuned for future coffee and convos, because we'll get either Scott Treemore or Phil Unit in to talk about this, and they've done a lot of work on that topic, but based on past fires, about how species respond most immediately after a fire, and then over time how wildlife recovers from areas. So please stay tuned for that. Janet Klauber asked, what are toxic larvae? Are there untoxic larvae? And if we're talking specifically about monarchs, in general, they are toxic. The species of milkweed vary in their toxicity, and that also impacts the larvae that feed on them as well. So you can have, strongly toxic monarch caterpillars and mildly toxic monarch caterpillars. And then last, and I think this might be our last one, are you still loyal to Pete's Coffee?
To what?
Are you still loyal to Pete's Coffee?
Oh, to Pete's Coffee.
It's a hard
question
here at the end.
It's hard. I mean, I still love Pete's Coffee, but I mean, I also support a lot of local roasters. Since I arrived in San Diego, I've been testing out all the different local coffees as well. I like really strong coffee, so Pete's is a lot of dark roast. So
yeah, I'm with you. And someone just reminded me in a little side chat here that on November 4th we are going to be having a Nat Talk on wildfires. It's going to be Megan Jennings, who's over at SDSU, who's a real powerhouse of looking at connections between wildlife corridors and wildfire and all of these things. And I'm sure that's going to be a great talk. So follow up with that one for those of you who were interested in that particular question. So I think with that, Judy, we're going to call this Coffee and Convo a wrap.
This has been fun.
Yeah, no, it is. It's good, and I learned some things. I thought I knew you relatively well, but now I know that you like the checker-throated antbird.
Ant wren, yeah.
Ant wren.
They're little. They're really little. Look up great potus. They are fantastic, and I'm sure highly endangered. All right. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for joining us, and hope to see you at an upcoming member meetup.
All righty. Emily, do you have anything else that you want to close with? Or are we done?
Sure, I'll pop on. I just wanted to say thank you, all of you, for joining us for this very first member meetup. I hope you guys had a fun time. Excited to continue on. We'll have our next one in 2 weeks on October 9th with John Redman. The links to register are all on our website. I saw many of your names pop up in the lists already, so I think we'll see you guys all there. Thanks for supporting us during this time. It's so great to have all of you and to hear all of your stories of the Nat. I love all the emails that you've sent me, and I hope you have a wonderful Friday and a great weekend.
We love our members. Thank you for your support.
Absolutely. Thank you all.